Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
This happened many years ago, but it's still fresh in my memory because it was just so absurd. I briefly wrote about it in my journal, and now I feel like sharing it here. Back then, I was in my late 30s and had a pretty solid group of friends. One of my closest friends had this sister who was honestly a walking disaster. This woman had an 8-year-old daughter who was basically a tiny tornado of destruction. The kid had zero boundaries and would grab whatever she wanted, break it, eat it, or just take it home. And if anyone dared to tell her no, she'd scream bloody murder until her mom came running to defend her precious angel. The mom never paid for anything her kid destroyed either. She'd just shrug it off like kids will be kids, you know. It drove everyone crazy. My friend and I started these horror movie nights because we were both huge fans of scary movies, but our other friends were always too chicken to watch them. So we decided to make it a regular thing where we'd get together 2 to 3 times a month, pick a theme, and marathon through some classics. The rule was simple: adults only. No kids allowed because the movies were way too intense. And frankly, we wanted to drink wine and relax without worrying about little ears hearing all the screaming and gore. These nights became really popular with our friend group. We'd rotate who hosted, and everyone would bring snacks and drinks. It was our way of unwinding from work stress and just having some good old-fashioned fun getting scared together. On this night, we were at my friend's house. We'd already gotten through half of our first bottle of wine, and were deep into this classic horror flick when suddenly the front door just burst open. No knock, no doorbell, nothing. In walks Karen with her demon spawn in tow. Karen announced cheerfully that she was heading out clubbing that night and was just going to leave her daughter with us. She said since we were all staying in anyway, it shouldn't be a big deal at all. My friend stood up and told Karen absolutely not. She reminded her about the no kids rule, especially since we were watching horror movies that night. Karen brushed off her concerns and told her not to be such a party pooper. She insisted her daughter would be fine and that kids love movies anyway. My friend explained that these weren't appropriate movies for children. She also pointed out that Karen hadn't even bothered to ask permission first, and couldn't just dump her daughter on us because she wanted to go out. The kid was already wandering around the living room, touching everything she could reach. While her mom and my friend argued, she managed to grab the remote control and hit play on the movie we'd paused. We'd paused right before this absolutely horrifying scene where a little boy gets pulled underwater by this blob creature and comes up screaming. Half his face melted off before getting dragged back down to die. It was brutal even for adults. The kid saw this and started shrieking at the top of her lungs. Karen whipped around and saw what was on the screen. Karen started screaming at us, asking what the hell was wrong with us and how we could let her baby watch such disgusting garbage. She was using every curse word in the book and getting more worked up by the second. Then she demanded to know which one of us sick freaks had brought this movie. I stood up because honestly I was getting really annoyed. This woman had barged into our private gathering, tried to dump her kid on us without asking, and now she was yelling at us because her daughter touched something she shouldn't have. I told her that her kid had grabbed the remote and played the movie while she was too busy arguing to watch her. I explained that this was exactly why we had a no kids policy in the first place. But then my other friend, this really athletic girl who'd had previous run-ins with Karen, also stood up. Karen's whole attitude changed when she saw her because they'd gotten into a physical fight at a party once. Karen had been hitting on my friend's fiancé right in front of everyone, then slapped my friend when she told her to back off. My friend beat the crap out of her in front of half the neighborhood. My friend told Karen it didn't matter whose movie it was. She said what mattered was that Karen had come here uninvited, tried to dump her kid on us, and then got mad when the child did exactly what she always does: touch things that don't belong to her. She told Karen to take her daughter and leave. Any normal person would have apologized and left, but Karen wasn't known for making smart choices. Instead, she got right up in my face. probably thinking I backed down since she was smaller than me. Karen started screaming that we were all disgusting people. She yelled that they needed us to watch her daughter tonight, as if that somehow made it our responsibility. She was screaming so loud I could feel spit hitting my face. When she finally stopped to breathe, I'd had enough. I asked her why exactly it was our job to watch her kid, pointing out that none of us had given birth to her daughter. Karen gasped like I'd just told her Santa wasn't real. Then she screamed that I had a son as if that somehow made me obligated to babysit any random kid. Now I was really mad. She was basically saying that because I'm a mom, I should automatically be willing to babysit any random kid that gets dumped on me. I told her yes, I do have a son, but I pointed out that he wasn't there with us. I explained that was because I'm not selfish enough to bring him to an adults-only gathering or dump him on people without asking first. That's when she completely lost it and tried to slap me. I saw it coming from a mile away and moved just enough to avoid her hand. Then I grabbed her arm, twisted it behind her back, grabbed a handful of her hair, and slammed her face against the wall, holding her there. I told her she had three choices. She could take her kid and leave quietly, I could beat her up right in front of her daughter, or I could call the cops and her ex-husband to come pick up his kid while she got arrested for assault. She was struggling and cursing, but I wasn't letting go until she made a choice. Karen agreed she would leave, but then she had the nerve to turn to her sister for backup. She asked if my friend was really going to let us treat her like this, reminding her that they were family. My friend walked over, took Karen's keys out of her purse, and removed the house key. She told Karen that both she and her daughter were no longer welcome in her home and ordered them to get out. Karen looked around at all of us, probably expecting someone to defend her. Instead, we all just stared at her with complete disgust. Karen called us all crazy and said every single one of us was insane. She grabbed her kid and walked toward the door, yelling that this wasn't over and that we'd regret treating her this way. Then she slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. My friend called her parents to warn them that Karen would probably show up trying to dump the kid on them instead. Apparently, this wasn't the first time Karen had pulled this stunt. Karen ended up missing her big night out because no one would take her kid. And about 6 months later, her ex-husband got full custody because Karen kept pulling irresponsible stunts like this. The courts had enough evidence to show she was an unfit mother. We went back to our movie marathon, but honestly, nothing on screen was as terrifying as dealing with an entitled parent who thinks the world owes them free babysitting. I'm 22 and still figuring out this whole adult thing. After dropping out of college because I couldn't afford it anymore, I spent about 6 months job hunting before landing a position at Sunny Suds Car Wash. The job pays $15 an hour, which is decent for someone with no real experience. The job itself is straightforward. I help customers through the wash tunnel, wipe down cars, and keep the place clean. My co-workers are cool and my manager is understanding when life happens. The uniform is simple enough, khaki pants and this red polo shirt with the car wash logo, plus a red apron when I'm working directly with the cars. The red is pretty bright, almost like a fire engine red. I usually change out of it right after work because it's not exactly street clothes, but I got comfortable with the routine and sometimes forgot. My daily routine after work involves a 25-minute walk home, and I almost always stop at Miller's Grocery about halfway there. It's convenient, and I usually grab some energy drinks or snacks for the next day. The employees there wear these button-up shirts in different colors: blue, green, sometimes yellow. Definitely nothing like my bright red car wash uniform. At least that's what I thought was obvious. This Tuesday started like any other. I just finished my shift and told my co-workers goodbye before heading out. I was tired and my mind was already on getting home and playing some video games, so I completely forgot to change clothes. I walked into Miller's, still wearing my red shirt and apron, looking exactly like I worked at a car wash, which I did, just not at this grocery store. I was standing in the drink aisle trying to decide between an energy drink and a soda when I felt someone tug on my sleeve. I turned around to see this woman, probably in her 40s, with that haircut that screams, "I want to speak to your manager." She was shorter than me by quite a bit. I'm 5'10", and she had this expectant look on her face. I stepped back thinking I was blocking her access to something, but that wasn't it at all. She told me, excuse me, that they were out of Pepsi, and she was wondering if I could go in the back to get some more. I apologized and told her that I didn't work there. I went back to looking at drinks, figuring she'd realize her mistake and move on. But instead she got more insistent. She said that of course I did work there, and told me to go get her the soda. I told her again that I didn't work there. I pointed directly at the car wash logo on my shirt, thinking surely that would clear things up. The logo isn't small either, it's got a picture of a car and soap bubbles with Sunny Sud's Car Wash written underneath it. But she completely ignored it. She demanded that I give her my name because she was going to complain to my manager. This was getting weird. I knew my actual manager was somewhere in Hawaii on vacation with his wife, so even if she somehow tracked him down, he'd probably just laugh about it. I told her I wouldn't give her my name and that she didn't need it because I didn't work there. She yelled that I did need to give her my name. Her voice was getting louder, and other customers were starting to stare. I just wanted to buy my drink and go home. I said no, I didn't have to, and tried to say that I just wanted to buy my stuff and leave. She screamed at me to give her my name right now. At this point, she was practically shrieking, and I was starting to feel uncomfortable. When I heard footsteps behind me and I turned to see my friend Jake walking down the aisle. Jake actually does work at Miller's. He's been there for about 2 years and works in the deli section. We went to high school together, and he knows exactly where I work. Jake said he could hear a commotion and asked what the problem was. I started to explain that there was just a misunderstanding, but Karen cut me off. She ranted that this employee was being incredibly rude and lazy. She said I wouldn't get her the soda she needed from the back and that I was refusing to give her my name so she could report me. She insisted I should be fired and that the customer is always right. Jake looked at my car wash uniform, then looked at Karen, clearly trying to process what was happening. Jake told her that I didn't work there and that I worked at the car wash down the street. He pointed out the logo on my shirt. She screamed that she demanded to speak with my manager about this employee. Jake asked her to please not yell because there were other customers in the store besides herself. She yelled back that I was not a customer, but a worker, and demanded that he get her the manager or she would have both of our jobs. Jake sighed and pulled out his phone, probably to text his manager to come up front. But before anyone else could arrive, Karen did something I absolutely did not expect. She grabbed my shirt collar with both hands and literally shoved me backward toward where she thought the manager should be. I stumbled back and bumped into Jake, and we both nearly fell over. That was the final straw for Jake. Jake said that was it, and he was calling the police. Karen's eyes went wide like she suddenly realized she'd made a huge mistake. She started backing away from us. She said, wait, no, that he couldn't do that because she was a customer and I was being rude. Jake told her that she had just physically assaulted someone who didn't even work there, and all over soda. She said this was ridiculous and that she was leaving. And she tried to do exactly that. She spun around and started speed walking toward the front of the store. But here's the thing about trying to make a dramatic exit in 3-inch heels on a grocery store's polished floor. It doesn't always work out. About 10 feet from where we were standing, her heel caught on something and she went down hard. Her purse flew open and stuff scattered everywhere. Jake was already on the phone with the police, and a couple of other employees had come over to see what was happening. Karen tried to get up and keep moving, but her ankle was clearly bothering her, and by then Jake's manager had arrived too. The police showed up about 10 minutes later. They talked to all of us, looked at the security cameras, and ended up arresting Karen for assault. Grabbing someone and shoving them counts as assault, even if you think they're being a bad employee. While they were dealing with all the paperwork, Jake's manager came over to me. The manager apologized for everything that happened and told me to take whatever I was going to buy on the house. So I ended up getting my energy drink for free, plus a story that none of my co-workers believed, until Jake backed me up. The weirdest part is that even after everything, the police, the arrest, the whole spectacle, I still don't think Karen ever actually looked at my shirt and realized I worked at a car wash. She was so convinced she was right that she couldn't see what was literally right in front of her face. I make sure to change out of my work clothes before going anywhere now. Not because I'm embarrassed about where I work, but because some people see a red shirt and completely lose their minds. I still shop at Miller's, and Jake and I laugh about it sometimes, but honestly, the whole thing was just bizarre. A week later, Jake told me Karen had tried to call the store to complain about her treatment and demand that both Jake and I be fired. The manager had to explain to her again that I don't work there and that she was the one who got arrested. 4 years ago, I was planning my wedding. My fiancée and I had been together for 5 years, and we were finally taking the big step. She was really stressed about finding the perfect bridesmaid dresses because her sister and best friend had completely different body types, and nothing seemed to work for both of them. That Saturday was one of those gloomy, rainy days where you just want to stay home. But we had appointments at 3 different bridal shops, and my fiancée was determined to find something. We'd already been to 2 places with no luck, and David's Bridal was our last hope for the day. After spending 2 hours at David's Bridal looking through what felt like hundreds of dresses, we finally found 2 options that might work. My fiancée was exhausted but happy, and we were heading home to grab some dinner and call it a day. The plaza where David's Bridal was located had this tricky intersection where you had to make a sharp turn onto the main road. The rain had been coming down all day, making everything slippery. I was being extra careful, checking both ways before pulling out. That's when it happened. This guy in a silver sedan came flying around the corner way too fast for the wet conditions. I could see him trying to brake, but his car just kept sliding toward us. He slammed right into the front driver's side of my car. My heart was pounding when I checked on my fiancée. She was shaken up but okay. We both got out to look at the damage. The guy's car looked perfect, not even a scratch. Mine had a nice dent in the front bumper and some scraping along the side. The other driver got out with his teenage son. He looked to be in his mid-40s, wearing work clothes like he was heading to a job site. He immediately started apologizing and asking if we were okay. I told him we were fine, just shaken up a bit. He seemed relieved and kept saying how sorry he was about the whole thing. His son stayed quiet the whole time, just looking embarrassed that his dad had caused an accident. The guy mentioned that the roads were really slick and that he was supposed to be at work in 20 minutes. My fiancé said we were just heading home. Then he suggested something that should have been a red flag. He said since we were both busy and nobody got hurt, maybe we could just handle this between ourselves without getting insurance companies involved. He made it sound like it would be faster and easier for both of us. I should have known better, but I was young and naive about these things. Plus, he seemed like a decent guy who just made an honest mistake. When I asked what he had in mind, he told me to just get a couple estimates for the damage and he'd pay me directly. We exchanged names and phone numbers. He explained that he was a construction worker and that he was actually going back to school part-time to get his contractor's license. He mentioned that he'd be getting some scholarship money in about 2 months when the new semester started, and he could pay me in cash then. It sounded reasonable enough, so we agreed to handle it that way. 2 days later, I took my car to a repair shop near my house. The mechanic looked it over and told me it was going to be $1,100. He explained that the bumper needed to be completely replaced and there was some damage to the mounting brackets underneath. I texted the guy right away with the estimate. He responded quickly saying that was fine and he'd have the money in 2 months like we discussed. A week later, I got a second opinion from another shop just to make sure the first estimate was fair. This one came back at $900, which was even better news. I sent him a text saying I got a second estimate for $900, which was $200 less than the first one. I sent the text and waited for a response. Nothing. I figured he was probably busy at work, so I waited another day and sent a follow-up message. Still nothing. By the end of the week, I'd sent 3 more texts with no response. That's when I realized what had happened. This guy had no intention of paying me anything. He'd played me completely. I was furious. Here I was, trying to plan my wedding and dealing with this dishonest jerk who thought he could just hit my car and disappear. But I wasn't about to let him get away with it. All I had was his name, his dead phone number, and a vague idea that he worked in construction somewhere in the area. So I decided to do some detective work. I started with Facebook searching for his name. There were several matches, but I found one that looked promising. The profile picture showed a guy about the right age, and when I scrolled through his family members, I found someone listed as his son who looked like the teenager who'd been in the car. My fiance's younger sister was in college and about the same age as his son. I had an idea that was probably a little crazy, but I was desperate. I asked if I could borrow her Facebook account for something. When she asked what for, I explained that I needed to find this guy who hit our car and then disappeared, and I thought I found his son on Facebook. She thought it was hilarious and agreed to help. We temporarily changed her last name on Facebook to match his, and then I sent a message to the son. I pretended to be a potential cousin trying to connect with family members I hadn't met yet. I asked if his dad's name was what I thought it was and if he worked in construction. The kid responded within a few hours, excited to meet a potential cousin. He confirmed his dad's name and even told me the specific construction company where he worked. He said his dad worked for Morrison Construction and acted like it was such a small world. I felt like a genius. The next day, I drove over to the area where our accident had happened and found Morrison Construction's office. Sure enough, there was his silver sedan sitting in the parking lot. I took pictures of his license plate in the car, making sure to get good shots that clearly showed it was the same vehicle from the accident. Then I drove straight to the courthouse. The clerk at the civil court desk was really helpful. She explained that I could file a small claims case against him. She told me they could mail the summons to his home address, or for an extra $25, they could have an officer serve it to him at his workplace. I told her I'd pay the $25. I figured if he wanted to embarrass me by ignoring my messages and making me track him down, then he could deal with being served legal papers in front of his co-workers. 3 weeks later, we both had to appear at the courthouse for a mediation session. He showed up looking annoyed and uncomfortable. We sat down with a mediator who explained the process. The mediator confirmed that we were there because of an automobile accident where the defendant agreed to pay for damages but then failed to follow through. I said that was right and that he stopped responding to my messages completely. Then he gave his excuse. He claimed that his phone got stolen and he had to get a new number so he couldn't contact me. The mediator asked him to step outside for a moment. Once he was gone, the mediator told me that his story didn't add up. She said if his phone was stolen, he could have reached out through social media or found another way to contact me. She thought he was just hoping I'd give up. When he came back in, we went over the terms I'd listed in my court filing. I hadn't just asked for the original $900. I calculated $2,400 total, which included the repair costs, gas money for all the driving around I'd had to do, compensation for my time, and extra for the hassle of having to track him down. He complained that $2,400 seemed like a lot. I told him that if he'd paid the $900 when he said he would, that's all it would have cost him. The mediator backed me up, saying I was within my rights to ask for additional compensation for time and expenses related to his failure to pay as agreed. He wasn't happy about it, but he agreed to pay the full amount rather than go to a formal hearing where it would be on his permanent record. Then he had the nerve to complain that he didn't appreciate me coming to his job and taking pictures of his car. I shot back that I didn't appreciate him hitting my car and then ignoring me for weeks. The mediator set up a payment schedule, and he also had to cover all the court costs on top of everything else. 2 months later, he paid the full $2,400 in cash, just like he'd originally promised to do. I took that money and the insurance payout from selling my damaged car and bought a much nicer vehicle outright. In the end, his dishonesty and entitlement actually worked out pretty well for me. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.